Hello friend, welcome to my channel. So today we are going to see how to create a cluster with managed Kubernetes service, which is Elastic Kubernetes Service, EKS. So this is the first cluster we are going to see, and that will be a demo cluster for us. So let's get started. So I logged into management console already, and you can search EKS service and go from there. I have it mentioned in my recent visited. So I'll just go to EKS first, and it gives us like a first page of EKS service. So here I can add cluster and create one, and here just this is a form which it expects us to key in such some information. So let's see, like whatever default information I have, right, we'll just review, and then we'll proceed with mostly default for the first EKS cluster. So let's give some name cluster, and then version I'm just going with default, and this is a cluster service role. And what does this role gives to the cluster, right? What we are doing as part of the cluster, right, we are really creating a control plane. In Kubernetes there will be control plane nodes, and there will be worker nodes. So here when we are creating cluster, we are creating a control plane component, and for that control plane to have access to other services to manage this EKS cluster, it needs some cluster role. And this cluster role you can create with instructions what is given in the document. So you can just follow this instruction as is, and you should be able to create a cluster role named EKS cluster role. So here if you see, I already have that cluster role created, so it's automatically coming without choosing it. But you can create with instructions from here and come back and choose it, right? And then you can refresh, and you should see your cluster role coming by default. So here I'll just keep everything default, and what I'll do is I'll choose VPC, which is default VPC for my account. You can create VPC and then create subnets and choose those, it is up to you. But here I'm going to create to choose default one, and I'll give you the link of this document which clearly tell you the requirement for VPC and subnet. So if you really want to play with little more and then create your VPC subnets, you can definitely do that. But for now, I'll just go ahead and choose default. And here I don't want all the subnets. Let me remove subnets which I don't want. I'll just go ahead and remove C, D, and just create in A and B. And sometimes if you choose all the subnets, right, what I have seen is while creating the cluster at the last step, it may fail saying that we don't have capacity in particular availability zone. So please select the appropriate availability zone. I have seen this happening, so I just go ahead and two subnets because I just want this for a demo. So yeah, even if you just choose everything and go ahead, it should work, but sometimes you might see that error. And I have seen somewhere in document that error is clearly mentioned that if there is no capacity in for that AZ, you may see error, and you should go back and choose the right subnet. So security group, I'll go ahead and choose default VPC security group, and here too you can create your own, or you don't specify anything, and EKS will create its own security group default. And what that security group will have, you can go in networking and see security group requirement. So when you don't specify security group, it create with this particular naming convention and these inbound and outbound restrictions. If you see, right, default doesn't have much restrictions, but if you want to restrict it, document clearly gives you guidance how you can restrict outbound traffic to certain ports. So you can do that if you want, right? I'll give the link of this document anyway. So this security group I choose default, and endpoint, like you can choose public, private, and even you can restrict your public access to certain CIDR block, and you can mention that block here. But we'll just go with public. We are keeping most of the things default. So you can see that, right, like I'm not changing many things because this is the first cluster we are creating. And eventually when you are comfortable with this cluster creation of cluster, right, you can play with and toggle the options and see how the behavior changes and how these features or options work for you. So here I am not going to go with logging. And EKS add-ons, this is advanced topic, but these are the default add-ons which comes when create the cluster, and I don't have any option to remove those. So like kubeproxy, core DNS, and Amazon VPC CNI. This is mainly all are related to networking. So we'll just go next, and here you can choose versions, and I have seen like whatever default we can just go ahead with for each of this add-ons. So next, and this is just a review and create summary for you, so you can just see what options we have chose. Like if you see Kubernetes version, we choose 1.24. this is IAM role, cluster role we have given. So networking, we just went with this particular VPC. These are the subnet. This is a security group. Then what access for our cluster endpoints we have given. Then APS, this is a API server endpoint. API server is a very important component of Kubernetes control plane. So this is an endpoint for it. And logging, no logging is selected so far, and add-on is default add-ons. So that's it. Like it's very simple, and cluster with default setting. We'll just go and click on create. Yeah, one thing, while it's creating, it takes like I have seen like almost 9 to 10 minutes. So let's it work for us in backend, and when it is active we can review this cluster. But one thing I forgot to mention is, please pay attention to the region where you are in. Here I am on North Virginia region, which is US East 1, and there I want to create this cluster. But please be mindful when you are creating cluster and what region you are choosing, right? So this is one thing you should be very mindful of. So, okay, so this is like creating. I don't expect it to finish anytime sooner, but let's see few things I want to show you in the document. Like what you may think, right? What is Kubernetes will have a different container runtimes. It can be Docker, it can be containerd, right? There are 3-4 different Kubernetes container runtime EKS support, or sorry, Kubernetes in general support, and EKS support Docker and containerd. So when I was going through information regarding that, I just want to show you what container runtime we are having, right? So if you go ahead with, and this is like when like you create EKS nodes, like we'll create nodes for creating pods and the worker nodes, right? That time also this will be applicable. So if you see, when you are creating nodes, you are getting Docker as a container runtime and containerd. Docker is there till 1.23 of EKS version, and from 1.24 onwards it is containerd. We chose 1.24, so for us it will be containerd. For us, like as it is a managed service, I don't think like it will matter much, but it is good information to have. So that's the reason I'm showing you this. So containerd and Docker like was there before for EKS. So if you see this, for Kubernetes version 1.23 or earlier, you can use an optional bootstrap flag to enable containerd. So they were like thinking about going into containerd in earlier versions as well, so they have given this option. But this feature provides clear path to migrate to containerd when updating to version 1.24 or later. Amazon EKS ended up support for Docker starting with the Kubernetes version 1.24 launch, and containerd runtime is widely adopted in Kubernetes community and is like what they are decided to go ahead with. So like now we are going to use containerd. As I said, it does not matter much for us because it's a managed service, but it is something you should be aware of. So that's it, guys. Like let's wait for this content or like cluster to be created, and I'll pause this video and come back when we have this cluster up and running. Okay, so cluster is ready now. You can see status changed to active from creating, and you have your first EKS cluster created and it's active and it's good for use. If you see this next step, provision compute capacity for your cluster by adding a managed node group or creating a Fargate profile. Fargate is a serverless way of doing it without using EC2 instances, but managed node group is we are adding worker node for adding pods and using the cluster for our application workload, and that is through EC2 instances. So this will do next, but for this tutorial I just want to show the cluster and how to connect to the cluster. So you can see the overview of this cluster. This is the API server endpoint, and we talked about this, it's having a public access. Then this is a cluster IAM role what we have created. So this few things I'll just browse through, and you can see that there is nothing which we created as a worker nodes, right, or created our pods. So it will be like whatever came by default as part of the add-on what we have added, which is a core DNS, which was a default add-on. So you can see this couple of pods there. There will be just default replica set or deployment. So we haven't created anything. So with this cluster, without creating worker nodes, we cannot add any pods, or we cannot run our application on this. So this is just a like EKS cluster with a control plane created. So you can just browse through it, but there is not much with what we have. So we don't have worker machines or worker nodes added so far. So networking, you there is not much, like it is same, like networking, I want to show you something on cluster security group, right, what I observed. So whatever clusters whatever security group which we chose, right, that is taken as an additional security group, but there is a security group which EKS created for us. So even if you do not specify security group when you create the cluster, it takes it's create one security group, and this is the security group which it's created, and this is a naming convention, and I have shown this to you in the document. So same thing I just want to show you in management console. So if you can see, inbound rule is all ports, and outbound is again all traffic, all ports. So this is the default security group. Okay, so we are good with this, and authentication, and there is nothing. Logging, we haven't chose anything. Update history, I don't expect anything here, because we haven't updated our cluster in any such way. So so that's it. I just want to show you this, and next is I want to show how to connect to your cluster, right? So for that purpose, I'm going to use EC2 instance. So I created this EC2 instance which with Amazon Linux as a AMI, and I'll try to connect to cluster EKS cluster from this EC2. So let me just connect to it, and this is really neat feature, Cloud Shell, right, where you do not need to worry about what I mean is worry about key and all that, right? You do not use putty. Usually I use putty, but here even you do not need to do that. So okay, so here I have a EC2 instance, and there should be AWS CLI already present. Let me see. Yes, 3 buckets, whether it can access. Okay, so that shows there is AWS CLI already installed, and same goes for kubectl. It is already there, so I don't want to do anything on that. So for next, right, for authentication, I will be creating kubeconfig file. So if you see kubeconfig file, what we are doing here is we are making sure that kubectl, which is already installed, it's able to connect to the cluster using kube configuration file. So command line tool, which is kubectl, uses configuration information is in kubeconfig file to access or communicate with the API server of a cluster. An API server endpoint I have shown you. So it uses this kubeconfig file and connect to the cluster. So creating it, there are two ways of creating kubeconfig. One is creating it automatically using AWS CLI update config command, or you can manually create using CLI or AWS IAM authenticator. And if you, for example, if you don't have kubectl in your server, right, here I have shown you it's already there, but if you don't have, easily you can just get it from this command. So install kubectl and just get kubectl. Even EKSCTL you can use to manage cluster, but I'll just show you kubectl. And kubectl is generic. EKSCTL is specific to EKS cluster, but kubectl is used for even if you are installing Kubernetes yourself, then you can not manage service, still you can use kubectl. So I'll just show you with kubectl, and then let's get started. Just showing getter caller ID STS is a normal command to see which IAM user is being used for the authentication. So next is, and I have shown you AWS CLI is able to connect, so we are good with that. So now this is a command what we should use. Let me see if I can paste this. Okay, so my cluster, good, like our name is same. So region, I'll just change it to the region where our cluster is running, US East 1, and pretty much that, right? EKS update kube config region US East 1 name my cluster. So yeah, so I think we are good. Okay, let me just create it. So yeah, so with this it says add a new context, this one to kube config, .kube config file. So we should be good. So let me see, kubectl get nodes. Okay, yeah, no resource found. So as I was saying, like this is just a cluster control plane. If you do it yourself, right, if you install Kubernetes on EC2 server or any other VM, right, you will have a control plane as well as worker nodes. So here it is a managed control plane for us, so it's not showing us those details like control plane details and all that. So when you install it yourself, you will see that. But here when we add managed node or worker nodes, you should see those nodes, but now we don't have anything. So if I do kubectl get pods, even I don't think there will be much which we can see, like there is nothing, right? So at least we are showing like we are able to connect to the cluster, and next step is to create a worker node, and definitely we'll going to do that, but that will be for next session, because I think like this is quite a lengthy session already. But I hope like you learned something new and find it interesting, and I expect you to try this on yourself and let me know how it goes. Documentation URL I'll give it in description. Yeah, thank you guys, thanks for watching, and if you are new here and haven't subscribed so far, please do so. Thanks, bye for now. Hope you learned something new today. If so, please like this video, share, leave your comment so that I know this content is helping you. Don't forget to subscribe, and that's now. Okay, see you again with yet another exciting tutorial about AWS. Keep learning, keep sharing what you learn, and thanks for watching.